There's something really exciting and magical about starting a brand new hobby. You jump in with no pressure, no expectations, just pure joy and enthusiasm about getting started. But over time, you can lose your way and actually forget about the main reasons why you embarked on that adventure in the first place. So today, I thought I'd try something a little bit different. I'm going to be stripping it all back to basics and going over how I'd get started with video game collecting in 2025. I'll go over how I'd navigate the inflated gaming market, where I'd focus my collecting habits, and how I'd actually house all of the games within my games room. If you're getting started into video game collecting or just need that hard reset, this video is for you, so let's get into it. One of the first things I would definitely do differently is I would go into my collecting journey with a clear vision. I've told this story in the past, but I think it's good to recount it. Back in 2021, when I first got into game collecting on a serious basis, I took myself up to Vintage Gamer, my local retro gaming shop, and I picked up a PlayStation 2 Slim and a bag full of PlayStation 2 games. Quite a lot of those games were absolute stinkers in my opinion. I picked up games like Big Mother Truckers 2, a ton of Harry Potter games, a ton of SpongeBob SquarePants games I had zero interest in playing. I picked them up because I was like a kid in a candy shop. Everything was new and shiny to me, and I just had to grab them. But back then, in 2021, I had actually met my first true love within gaming, and that first love was JRPGs. I just came off the back of beating Persona 5 Royal and Tales of Arise, and I was a true anime JRPG weeb. So why didn't I build my game collection around JRPGs and that genre and those games that I truly loved? Like I said, everything was new and shiny to me, and I went in without a clear vision or purpose of how I wanted my game collection to grow. If I was to get started with video game collecting in 2025, I would go in with a clear vision and a focus of what I wanted to accomplish with my game collection. I'd make a list of games, genres and consoles that I actually wanted to play and own in my game collection. I'd also outline what the main purpose of me getting into game collecting was. Was it to build a game collection filled with games from my childhood and to be able to relive those for nostalgia purposes? Or was it to have a library of games that passed me by due to not having enough money to pick up games back when I was younger? Whatever the reason, having a clear goal and a clear focus right at the start of your collection journey will ensure that you've got games in your collection that you can't wait to play, and your shelves are filled with tons of amazing games you can't wait to get to in the future. If I started from scratch with video game collecting in 2025, the next thing I would do differently is maybe consider capping my collection at say 100 games, or capping my collection per console. This would mean that my game collection would become my backlog. I would only have games that I either wanted to play or games that I loved playing in the past. I wouldn't have any other filler, any other shovelware, any other games taking up space and gathering dust. Everything within my game collection would have a clear, defined purpose. But you might be asking, why aren't you doing that already? Why have you got over 500 games in your collection? I think the biggest barrier stopping me from really narrowing down my collection and really cutting out a lot of the filler and the fat is due to a lot of the titles in my game collection being picked up for some great prices. I picked up some amazing bargains at the car boot sales over the years. One of my best finds is a copy of Shadow Hearts. I found that game on the PlayStation 2 for just 25p, and I've got so many games like that in my collection that I know if I was to offload them and sell them on, I would never find those games at those kind of prices again in the future. And while I don't recommend collecting from a financial perspective, I'm very much a vibe gamer where I don't really have a clear backlog or a clear list of games that I want to get to. I just play games based on my mood and based on how I'm feeling at that time, and if I was to sell certain games, it would absolutely kill me knowing that I'd paid, pounds for games that are way more expensive on CX and eBay, and then when that day and that time does strike and I fancy dipping my toes into it, I no longer have it in my collection and I've got to fork out a lot more money than I initially did. So that is why I keep a hold of a decent amount of games in my game collection, because you never know when that fancy may strike. From building a curated gaming library, the next thing I would definitely do differently is go in with a clear focus on a certain set of consoles. I currently collect for 12 consoles and I feel like I'm definitely spreading myself a bit too thin. I've got everything from the PlayStation 1 right up to the PlayStation 5 and everything in between, like Nintendo and the Xbox consoles. I feel like if I was going to start collecting in 2025, I'd go in with a clear vision of collecting for 4 main console types. First up, I would collect for a retro console or retro set of consoles. For me, that would definitely be the PlayStation 2 and the PlayStation 3. PlayStation 2 has got one of the best libraries of all time, and it's a console that I hold dear to my heart as a console I played tons growing up. And you know my love for the PlayStation 3, do I need to say anymore? And while I don't consider it to be a retro console yet, it is clocking up to be almost 20 years old, so one day we can definitely call it retro, and it is definitely my favourite console of all time, so I'd have to collect for it. I would also look to have a backwards compatible PlayStation 3 that was Frankenstein modded, so that I could play PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 games on the same console. It would enable me to have a much cleaner setup, one console, one HDMI cable and one power lead, and it would also mean I can play all my games on my 4K 55-inch TV. The big problem with retro consoles is that they don't scale too good on modern TVs, and PlayStation 2 doesn't look great on a big 55-inch 4K TV, so going down the PlayStation 3 backwards compatible route would definitely allow me to get the best out of a lot of PlayStation 2 games. I would definitely love to have a retro setup with a CRT TV, as I do feel a lot of the pre-HD consoles look banging on a CRT, but I just don't have the space right, so I think this would definitely be a great compromise. Next up, I would focus on a modern console. Without doubt, I would put my money into the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5. Like I mentioned on my PlayStation 4 collecting video a couple of weeks ago, the PlayStation 4 has one of the best libraries within gaming, period. You can walk into pretty much any CEX and come out with a bag full of PS4 games. It's super cheap, super accessible, and there's never been a better time to build your PlayStation 4 collection. And as and when the time comes, when you upgrade to the PlayStation 5, you've got an amazing library that is fully backwards compatible with your PlayStation 5. There's probably only about 10 or 20 games that aren't playable on the PlayStation 5, but everything else on the PlayStation 4 can be played on the PlayStation 5. So without doubt, PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 would be a prominent part of my game collection. I'd then also focus on a handheld. As I've grown up and gotten older and had a lot less time to spend in this games room, I've learned the true power of having a dedicated handheld console, and for me, I would go with the Nintendo Switch. A great library of first-party Nintendo games, a very good library of indie titles and third-party titles, and it's just so versatile. You can dock it on your TV and play it like a traditional console. You can take it off the dock and take it in handheld mode. It's got so many ways to play it and a great library to boot. And finally, for everything else, PlayStation 1, GameCube, 3DS, DS, even Xbox 360, I would go down the emulation or the digital route. Now, I'm not advocating for piracy and start downloading a bunch of ROMs, but it's got to be said, it's so convenient to be able to emulate these older games on more modern systems and PCs. A lot of the time, these older games play way better via emulation. You get save states, way better performance, and you can even mod them to make them look better than ever. If I did go down the emulation route, I would go in with a hard set rule. If I emulated any game, if I enjoyed it, I would pick it up and add it to my physical game collection. That way, I'm not just hoarding some ROMs like some dodgy pirate. I'd have games in my collection that I truly love. To do all of this, I would go down the Steam Deck route. If I didn't fancy owning a Nintendo Switch, I would also double up and use that as my handheld console. The Steam Deck is so versatile, great library, and it's a great emulation device. I'd also look more into digital purchases. I'm king physical media. I love having the complete in-box experience, opening up a game and going through the manual like it was 2001, but even myself, right, I've got to admit that digital is a lot more convenient and a lot more cost effective in certain scenarios. I've got a copy of The Legend of Dragoon that I picked up last year and it cost me a whopping £140. It's a super cool JRPG exclusive to the PlayStation 1, great turn-based combat with some real-time elements like Lost Odyssey and Clair Obscur, a banging soundtrack and a beautiful old-school retro nostalgic graphical style. But you can jump on to the PS Store on your PlayStation 5 and pick it up for just $7.99. That is a massive difference when it comes to prices. And for these retro games where I'm not too sure if they're going to be my cup of tea, I would look more into digital, and if I really loved them, then look into getting the physical. But I don't think digital is the devil incarnate that we all make it out to be, especially for these retro titles. So if I was starting again with video game collecting, when it comes to building up my console collection, I'd focus massively on the PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5, and I'd use a Nintendo Switch if I wanted a traditional handheld experience, or if I wanted something a bit different, I would use a Steam Deck as my dedicated handheld console, and I'd also look into emulation and digital gaming to ensure that my game collection remained streamlined and only contain games that I actually love and want to play in the future. From games and consoles to shelving units, the next big thing I would change is how I actually house my games in my game collection within my games room. Like everyone on the internet who's got a game collection, I've got a set of billy bookcases, which is pretty much the de facto standard when it comes to gaming shelves and shelving units. They just work right, they're affordable, they're fairly readily available, and pretty much everyone has a IKEA up the road that they can go to, and it doesn't take a genius to build these bad boys. But in order to get the game to look aesthetically pleasing on the shelf and to make the games pop, I've had to do a couple of modifications. So I've had to use a plank of wood with some adhesive tape to push the games right to the front of the shelving unit, just so when you walk in, the games slap you in the face and really come in with a heavy punch. But there's no denying there's a lot of wasted space with the billy bookcases due to how wide they are. And if I had my time again, I would go with the Ginedi, which are also from IKEA and are purpose built for DVDs and games. They are half as deep as a billy bookcase and don't require the wooden planking propping hack. They also take up a much smaller footprint in the room, which is so important when space is so limited. Now, I'm pretty good when it comes to setting myself a dedicated budget for my game collection hobby, and I'm pretty good at making that budget stretch even further when it comes to going to the car boot sales, buying games, DVDs, Blu-rays, electronics, all of those great things that we can buy and flip into CEX for those sweet vouchers. But if I was to start again in 2025 on my game collecting journey, I would look to take it up a step and take it up a notch and actually try and do something a bit different when it comes to my budget. I'd try and set myself a little challenge of trying to build a game collection from just £20 or even an entirely free game collection. This idea was massively popularised by YouTube channels like Retro Rick, who set out on a journey to build a game collection for just $10 by buying, selling, wheeling and dealing and building up a game collection from starting with just a $10 budget. I think it'd be so amazing and so empowering to walk around your games room and go, all of this around me was built with just £10 or £20 or even entirely free. It would be an amazing feeling, and I absolutely love watching channels like the Gentleman of Games, who has built an entire game collection for free. He goes to car boot sales, cash converters, charity shops, he buys a boatload of games, sells off everything that he doesn't want to add to his collection, makes his money back and then adds things to the collection for free. Such an amazing way to build a collection on a budget without breaking the bank. The final thing I would do differently if I was starting a game collection from scratch in 2025 is to actually broaden my horizons and to collect more than just video games. One of the big reasons I absolutely love JRPGs is the over-the-top anime character design, and I'd love to have some amazing figures on my shelves from my favourite series like Persona, Trails, Final Fantasy, but the problem with these figures is they take up a lot of space. I've got a ton of games and I just don't have the space to house any more figures on my shelves. I'd also love to have sections in my games room dedicated to certain franchises like Persona, Final Fantasy, Trails, or maybe even a Silent Hill shelf. I love how games rooms look so cool when you've got a shelf just dedicated to a single franchise. It looks fantastic when you've got games, books, memorabilia, figures, all from the same franchise. It just looks amazing, and I'd love to do more of that, but I just haven't got the space, and my games room is mainly built around games. But if I was to start again, I would look to broaden my horizons and try and incorporate different things when it came to video game collecting and collecting as a whole. So that is how I would approach video game collecting from scratch in 2025. I would focus massively on games, genres, consoles that I truly had a passion for right from the get-go, and I would also use a different set of shelving units to house all of my games in my games room. I'd also look to set a budget challenge, and I might even look to broaden my horizons when it comes to collecting and go beyond just video game collecting. Let me know in the comments down below how you would approach this topic and what you guys would do differently if you was to start a game collection in 2025. If you had a blank canvas, would you go down a completely different collecting path, or would you double down and go down the same path you're on at the minute and just go even more hardcore? Sound off in the comments down below. And while you're down there in the comments, if you haven't done so already, then please hit the like button and do consider subscribing to the Collector's Quest channel to make sure you don't miss out on all of the fantastic content we got coming up on the channel. And as always, good luck on your game hunting collecting adventures. Take it easy, YouTube, and I'll catch you in the next one.